Right from the very word go, Brexiteers have always had to sell a false prospectus to get their ideas across the line, going all the way back to, again, 2016. And the question was asked of, well, okay, you say you want to, take back control and do, quote, global Britain. But what do you actually mean? Because I've always said this before. Politics is a game where, it is a game where a lot of people do a lot of talking. But sometimes you've got to put your money where your mouth is, and you've got to write it and create a bill that you're going to put into Parliament. And as we've always said, there has been no policies ever attached to Brexit, going all the way back to 2016. There was not a single policy proposal the Brexiteers put forward for taking back control, doing global Britain, doing all this stuff that they indeed promised. And this is now going to come home to roost hard. First of all, you're having the fact that Boris Johnson, something that is inexorably tied to him. If Johnson goes, will there be a drive for a harder Brexit or a softer Brexit, a reopening of negotiations again? We don't know. That's very much all up in the air. But with more and more MPs now, shall we say, openly willing to, shall we say, not only question Boris Johnson, but actually openly rebel against Johnson, a lot of interesting things do indeed come into play, especially going forward into next year. But interestingly enough, a lot of the leading Brexiteers themselves aren't now, shall we say, happy with their project. Unsurprisingly, because, like we said at the beginning, Brexit has never had any policy. And whenever an idea, especially a political idea, gets put forward with no policy, it's essentially doomed to die. That's where we are really with Brexit. So today we're going to head on over to the Yorkshire Bylines, but before we do that, we're going to ask you to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And also down below, there are some links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, as we said, on to the Yorkshire Bylines with the title, Leading Brexit Advocates Notice the Shine Has Now Come Off It. Disillusionment is setting in the Telegraph. All the bright hopes resting on Brexit are slowly dying, and some of its staunchest advocates are finding it hard to actually disguise their disappointment. Alistair Heath, editor of the Sunday Telegraph, and Fraser Nelson, occupying Boris Johnson's old job as editor of The Spectator, both had articles in the daily edition of The Telegraph this week, bemoaning the fact that Brexit wasn't going quite as well as they hoped. The two editors are having serious doubts about the project that they championed themselves back in 2016. It is as if they are slowly coming to suspect that there might be something wrong, although neither of them is quite prepared to say so just yet. This comes just after 10 months outside of the EU. Jacob Rees-Mogg once talked about the benefits not materialising for 50 years, so they might have to curb their impatience. Heath, the editor of the Sunday edition, portrays the Brexit crisis as a boy's own world, where Johnson is a sort of a Ken Clark character engaged in the existential battle with a very mysterious group he calls the Blob, which is obviously secretly ruins Britain. The Blob is taking back control and destroying Boris Johnson's premiership. But again, who is the Blob? Heath's article identifies the amorphous, very elite class who are somehow secretly colluding to block the benefits of Brexit, while also being delivered by Boris's plucky, by old plucky Boris. He praises Johnson for getting us out of the EU, but fears his courage has completely deserted him, and he has been captured by the Blob. In fact, the Prime Minister is the archetypal elite class isn't mentioned. Instead, the promised Shangri-La of lower prices, reduced tax burdens, and higher productivity, health companies that are Taxes are shooting up, the economy is stagnating, with no plan to eliminate any of the unnecessary regulations weighing it down. The cost of living is surging, and this devastating energy crisis is nigh. And most damagingly of all, the government appears to have absolutely no plan how to tackle any of this. He sees no connection, of course, between Brexit and an economy headed for trouble. And as we said at the beginning, Brexit was completely policylessness. So, of course, they have absolutely no plan to tackle these problems because, as far as they were concerned, Brexit shouldn't have any problems. Nielsen also asks, was I right to support Brexit? If this is global Britain, I'm starting to wonder. Frankly, the answer has to be no. Nelson has openly and perhaps mightly say belatedly questions Lord Hannan's infectious Brexity optimism and asks, where are all these sunlit uplands and what happened us to staying close to Europe? The latest figures show our service and exports to the EU falling twice as fast as those to the rest of the world, although the pandemic does tend to skew everything. Even Liz Truss's trade deals come in for it. If you're a Brexiteer, you can suspend disbelief by not looking too closely at the nature of those deals. But if you do, you see the flaw. Most of them are rolled over EU agreements, Nelson notes. The new Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, also says that Nelson was denouncing the protectionism as a giant evil just a few days ago. But inside the Tory government, Tory protectionists are ready to swoop, warning about growth hormones injected into Australian cows, for one. Of course, Michael Gove's favourites, the chlorine wash used on American chickens. Such arguments take place behind closed doors and do so to a depressing extent. The protectionists tend to win. It is of no surprise of Heath and Nelson, like Johnson and Grove, are journalists of one sort or another, gifted at writing but not much else. They have no first-hand experience of the many varied topics that they write about, and Brexit is probably perhaps the best example. Before the referendum, they all fed off each other, a think tank full of researchers skilled at presenting numbers in whichever way they wanted to. Products and the figures of over 60 million a week were to be savaged by scrapping the EU regulations. Johnson picks it up, as he used to do in the Telegraph column and on the campaign trail. Heath assumes that it's right, that Johnson must have verified it. He takes it as it is read. Nelson spots it as he also then assumes that Britain is drowning under these supposed useless regulations invented in a protectionist Brussels and is forced on UK businesses, ready to be cast aside the minute we left the EU. It would also not bear the sunlight scrutiny, but none of them bothered to even spend 5 minutes actually checking if the national savings from the unnecessary EU rules were true or not. This is how Brexit succeeded. They also hoped for the massive bonfire of EU regulations that will also never be lit. And we will never escape the huge gravitational force of the EU rules. But now, as a third country, the EU cannot be blamed. Someone else must carry the can. And it cannot be Johnson or Brexit or even the Tory government. They are all untouchable for Heath and Nelson. So a new enemy must be invented. It's the Blob, the elite class, the protectionists, the Remainers, the civil service, anyone and anything except the real culprits. When that fails to convince, it will be the industry and the people to blame. Soon the finger of blame will be pointed at you and me, so you best watch out. And we all knew this was coming. This has been predicted ever since the start of this year, going all the way back to, triggering of Article 50. Oh, it's these secret people trying to keep us in the European Union. But here's the thing. Most of the Conservative MPs know the benefits of being in the EU, being part of the single market, being part of the customs union. They know the benefits. But they know that the voting public don't want to go the way they want to go, which is to create this low tax, low regulation country, which, again, no one voted for. Time and time again, when people are surveyed, they want high regulations, they want high services, they want taxes to go to pay to those public services that everyone agrees that they want. So you can see that this very core niche of hardcore Brexiteers are completely at odds, not only with the British public, but even the British public that voted for Brexit. You know, we've said it time and time again. Go back and have a look at all of Leave's literature. No one said at all that we were going to leave the single market or customs union. That was what Leave said. We will not be leaving that. We'll be remaining in that. You know, what happened? And the interesting thing, I think we'll have to go over this at some point. I think they mention it very recently, obviously, the Fraser Nelson and this article that he wrote about it. We probably have to go over that at some point, because that's very very fascinating to watch, because he actually was in moderating a conversation between Daniel Hannan and Lord Adonis, and Fraser was questioning more of Daniel Hannan's position than he ever was of Lord Adonis, who's saying, look, this is the situation that we are in. The only way to solve it is to rejoin the EU. So, you know, here we are once again back at square one of, well, the only answer is to rejoin the EU. And of course, we can immediately rejoin the customs union and single market. But of course, you know, rejoining the EU will, of course, take time eventually. But it's, you know, it's not off the table, and there's no country out there saying that they wouldn't block us for re-entry. But that's eventually what we'll get to. We'll just, you know, we will rejoin. It's just a matter of time, obviously. And of course, the huge gymnastical assault that we'll probably have to see the Conservatives do to spin rejoining that. But again, we'll have to see how that all plays out in the end. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all